What happens when love turns into obsession and survival comes at a deadly cost? Watch to find out. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping, emotional stories. The air in Ekong's mansion was cold and suffocating, despite the luxury that surrounded Amara. It had been weeks since she returned, but the walls felt closer, the rooms darker, and the weight on her chest heavier. She was trapped again, body, mind, and soul. Ekong treated her like a prize he had won after a long battle. He paraded her in public, showered her with gifts, and acted as though their love was perfect. But behind the grand displays of affection was the same man who had broken her once before. At home, he was relentless. His obsession had worsened since her return. Morning, afternoon, night. He wanted her constantly, ignoring her exhaustion and emotional withdrawal. No matter how tired she was, he demanded her attention. "Amara," he said one evening after dinner, as she tried to slip away to the guest room, "why are you avoiding me?" She froze, her hand on the door handle. "I'm just tired, Ekong. It's been a long day." He chuckled, a low, menacing sound that made her skin crawl. "You're my wife. You shouldn't be tired when I need you." She forced a smile, hoping it would pacify him, but deep down, something inside her shattered again. Amara barely slept anymore. Every night felt like a battle she couldn't win. If she wasn't enduring Ekong's advances, she was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of hopelessness pressing down on her. Even during the day, she wasn't free. He called her constantly, checking on her, reminding her that she belonged to him. Eni had tried to visit once, but Ekong made it clear that Amara didn't need outside distractions. "You have everything you need right here," he told her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Amara stopped calling Eni after that. She didn't want to put her best friend in danger. One afternoon, as Amara sat by the window, watching the rain fall, a wave of despair hit her so hard that she had to gasp for air. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to herself, her voice breaking. But what could she do? She had tried to escape, and it had only brought her back to this nightmare. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Blessing, one of the housemaids. "Madam, are you okay?" Blessing asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Amara forced a nod. "I'm fine." Blessing hesitated, then stepped closer. "You don't look fine, Ma. If you need anything, you can trust me." Amara blinked. Could she? A desperate idea formed in her mind. If she couldn't escape, maybe she could find a way to protect herself, at least enough to get some peace. "Blessing," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Do you know anyone who can help me?" Blessing's eyes widened, but she nodded slowly. "Yes, madam, I know someone." Amara exhaled shakily. "Please, I need help before I lose myself completely." Amara paced the length of her bedroom, her mind racing as she waited for Blessing's return. She had sent the housemaid out with a simple but desperate request: find someone who could give her something, anything that would help her escape Ekong's relentless obsession. She wasn't looking for freedom anymore. That dream had died the day she walked back into Ekong's arms. Now, she just wanted a little peace. She stared out the window, biting her nails, a habit she'd developed since her return. The mansion's gates loomed large in the distance, as unyielding as the man who controlled everything behind them. The sound of footsteps approaching her door made her jump. She quickly sat on the edge of the bed, trying to look composed. "Madam." Blessing's voice was low as she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She held a small, wrapped parcel in her hands. Amara stood, her heart pounding. "Did you find someone?" Blessing nodded, handing her the package. "Yes, Ma, a herbalist. He said this will help. It's supposed to make Oga calmer." She hesitated before adding, "He said you should only use a little bit each day." Amara unwrapped the parcel with trembling hands. Inside was a small jar filled with a dark, powdery substance. It smelled faintly of bitter roots and herbs. "Did he say it's safe?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Blessing shrugged. "He said it will weaken him a little every day, just enough to give you some rest." Amara stared at the jar, hope and fear warring inside her. She didn't want to hurt Ekong. She just wanted him to stop treating her like a possession, to stop demanding more from her than she could give. "Thank you, Blessing." she said, her voice shaky. Blessing nodded and slipped out of the room, leaving Amara alone with the jar. That night, Amara prepared Ekong's evening tea as usual, but this time she added a tiny pinch of the herbal mixture. She stirred it carefully, watching as the powder dissolved into the liquid. When she brought the tea to him in the living room, her hands shook slightly. "Thank you, my love," Ekong said, taking the cup from her. He sipped it without suspicion, his eyes still fixed on the TV screen. Amara sat quietly beside him, her heart racing. She watched as he drank the tea, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Ekong finished the tea, placed the cup on the table, and pulled her closer. "Come here," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't resist. She let him kiss her, let him hold her, all the while wondering if the mixture had done anything at all. The next morning, Amara woke up to find Ekong still asleep beside her. Normally, he would have been awake before dawn, already planning his day and making demands on her time. But now he slept soundly, his breathing deep and even. Amara slipped out of bed, quietly, her heart thudding with cautious hope. Maybe it was working. Maybe she had finally found a way to make him leave her alone. Over the next few days, Amara continued adding small amounts of the herbal mixture to Ekong's tea. At first, the changes were subtle. He started coming home earlier, complaining of fatigue. He spent more time resting and less time following her around the house. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked one evening as he lay on the couch, looking unusually pale. "I'm just tired," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Too much stress lately." Amara nodded, hiding her relief. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. She had dinner without him watching her every move. She took long baths without him knocking on the door. She even started reading again, something she hadn't done since before they got married. It wasn't freedom, but it was close enough. One evening, as Amara prepared his tea, she caught a glimpse of herself in the kitchen mirror. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look like a ghost. There was a hint of color in her cheeks, a spark in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. She carried the tea to Ekong, who was sitting in his study reviewing some documents. He looked up as she entered, his eyes softening. "You're looking beautiful tonight," he said, surprising her. "Thank you," she murmured, setting the tea down in front of him. He reached out and took her hand, pulling her onto his lap. "You've been different lately," he said, studying her face. "Happier." She forced a smile. "I think it's because you've been less demanding." He chuckled. "Maybe I'm just getting old." She laughed softly, but inside, guilt twisted in her stomach. She didn't want to hurt him, she just wanted peace. As he sipped his tea, she rested her head on his shoulder, pretending everything was fine, but deep down, she knew she was walking a dangerous line. The first signs were easy to dismiss. Ekong had always been a man who worked hard and pushed himself relentlessly. So, when he started complaining of fatigue, Amara wasn't alarmed at first. She told herself that the herbal mixture was doing exactly what the herbalist said it would, making him tired, calming his obsession, and giving her space to breathe. At first, it worked perfectly. Ekong came home earlier from work, often too exhausted to talk much, and would drift off to sleep without making any demands on her. Amara relished those peaceful evenings when she could sit alone in the quiet house, feeling almost free. But as the days passed, the fatigue deepened. One evening, about 3 weeks after she started adding the mixture to his tea, Amara found Ekong sitting on the couch, his face pale and drawn. "Are you okay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. He nodded slowly, rubbing his chest. "I'm fine, just a little tired, and my chest feels tight." "Maybe you should see a doctor," Amara suggested, her heart skipping a beat. "I don't need a doctor," Ekong said dismissively. "I just need rest." But that night, as he slept beside her, she noticed how shallow his breathing had become. He tossed and turned, mumbling in his sleep. And at one point, he woke up coughing violently. Amara sat up, watching him with growing unease. "Ekong, you're not well. You need to get checked." "I said I'm fine," he snapped, though his voice was weaker than usual. Amara bit her lip, guilt and fear churning inside her. She hadn't meant for this to happen. The mixture was supposed to calm him down, not make him sick. The next morning, Amara stood in the kitchen, staring at the jar of herbs on the counter. She hadn't added any to his tea the night before, hoping he would feel better without it. But as she prepared breakfast, she heard him coughing again, deep, wrenching coughs that sent chills down her spine. "Amara," he called, his voice hoarse. She rushed to the living room and found him sitting on the edge of the couch, his hand pressed to his chest. "Help me up," he said, breathing heavily. "I need water." Amara helped him to the kitchen, her heart pounding as she watched him struggle to walk. His legs seemed unsteady and sweat beaded on his forehead. "Please let me call a doctor," she begged. "I said no," he snapped, though there was no strength behind his words. As he sat down at the kitchen table, Amara poured him a glass of water and placed it in front of him. She wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but she didn't know what. Over the next few days, Enkay's condition worsened. He started staying in bed longer, complaining of headaches, chest pain, and nausea. He barely ate, and when he did, he would often throw up afterward. Amara was terrified. She stopped adding the mixture to his tea completely, hoping his health would improve, but it didn't. "Maybe it's stress," she told him one afternoon, as she helped him lie down after another coughing fit. "Maybe," he muttered, closing his eyes. But deep down, Amara knew it was something more. One evening, Enkay suddenly collapsed in the hallway. Amara heard the thud and rushed out of the bedroom to find him lying on the floor, gasping for air. "Help!" he choked, clutching his chest. "Hold on!" Amara cried, grabbing her phone and dialing for an ambulance. Her hands shook as she gave the dispatcher their address. Then she knelt beside Enkay, trying to keep him calm. "Just breathe," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Help is on the way." But Enkay's breathing grew weaker. His eyes rolled back and his body went limp in her arms. "No, no, no," Amara screamed, shaking him. "Enkay, stay with me, stay with me." But it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, Enkay was gone. The house was eerily silent after they took his body away. Amara sat on the couch, staring at the floor, numb with shock. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Enkay was dead. She had wanted peace, not this. She had wanted space, not a corpse in her arms. And now everything was spiraling out of control. The next day, Enkay's family demanded an autopsy. Amara wasn't surprised. The Udos were a powerful, suspicious family, and they weren't going to let their son's sudden death go unquestioned. She waited anxiously as the days passed, dreading what the results might reveal. Then, one afternoon, 2 police officers arrived at the mansion. "Mrs. Udo," one of them said, his expression grim, "we need you to come with us." "Why?" Amara asked, her voice trembling. The officer exchanged a look with his partner before answering. "We have reason to believe your husband was poisoned." Amara's blood ran cold. At the police station, Amara sat in a small interrogation room, her hands cuffed to the table. "We know about the herbs," the detective said, throwing a file onto the table. "The autopsy showed traces of toxic compounds in your husband's system, and we found the jar in your kitchen." "It wasn't poison," Amara said desperately. "It was just supposed to calm him down, to make him less aggressive. I didn't know it would hurt him." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Less aggressive?" Amara's face crumpled. He was obsessed. I just wanted some peace. I didn't mean for him to die." But the detective didn't look convinced. To him, and to the rest of the world, Amara wasn't a desperate woman trying to survive. She was a murderer, a wife who had poisoned her husband to get rid of him, and there was nothing she could say to change their minds. The investigation into Enkay's death began swiftly, fueled by the Udo family's influence and insistence on answers. Within hours of the autopsy report confirming traces of poison in his system, the mansion was swarming with police officers, detectives, and forensic specialists. Amara sat quietly in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as they searched every corner of the house. She could barely think, barely breathe. The events of the past few days felt like a terrible nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Her mind kept replaying that horrible moment. Enkay gasping for air, collapsing in her arms, and the helplessness that had crushed her as she watched him die. She hadn't meant for this to happen. She hadn't meant to kill him, but none of that mattered now. "Mrs. Udo, we need you to answer some questions. one of the detectives said, pulling her from her thoughts. Amara looked up, her heart pounding. I already told you everything. I didn't poison him. I didn't mean for him to die. The detective's expression was cold and skeptical. We found the jar in your kitchen. The herbs you were putting in your husband's tea contained toxic compounds. Do you deny giving it to him? Amara swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes. I didn't know it was poison. I just wanted to calm him down. Calm him down? The detective asked, raising an eyebrow. He was obsessed, Amara whispered, her voice trembling. He wouldn't leave me alone. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. The detective exchanged a look with his partner, then leaned forward. Mrs. Udo, did you have any reason to want your husband dead? Amara's chest tightened. No, I didn't want him dead. I just wanted peace. I wanted to survive. Survive what? The detective pressed. Amara hesitated, her mind racing. She wanted to tell them the truth, that Enkay had been abusive, controlling, and relentless. But would they believe her? Or would they see her as a desperate wife who had killed her husband to escape him? I can't explain, she said finally, lowering her gaze. The detective sighed. Mrs. Udo, until we get more answers, we're placing you under arrest for the suspected murder of your husband, Enkay Udo. Amara's heart stopped. The ride to the police station was a blur. Amara sat silently in the back of the squad car, staring out the window as the city passed by. People walked the streets, laughing, talking, living their lives, while hers was falling apart. When they arrived at the station, she was fingerprinted, photographed, and led to a small, cold interrogation room. Her hands were cuffed to the table, and she waited, trembling, as the detectives reviewed her case. Hours later, a lawyer sent by the Udo family arrived. He was tall, stern, and completely uninterested in hearing her side of the story. You've caused a lot of trouble, Mrs. Udo, he said, setting a briefcase on the table. The Udos want justice for their son, and right now all the evidence points to you. Amara shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I didn't kill him. I didn't mean for him to die. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Intent doesn't matter. What matters is that he's dead, and you gave him the herbs that killed him. That's all a jury will care about. Amara felt like she was drowning. What happens now? The prosecution will build their case, and unless you have a miracle up your sleeve, you'll be facing a murder charge, the lawyer said bluntly. Amara's head dropped into her hands. How had it come to this? How had everything spiraled so completely out of control? The news of Enkay's death and Amara's arrest spread quickly. By the next morning, it was all over the media. Billionaire's wife arrested for poisoning her husband. Black Widow, the shocking case of Amara Udo. Murder or survival? The trial that shock in Nigeria. The headlines were brutal, painting Amara as a cold, calculating woman who had killed her husband to escape his control. Amara watched the news reports from the tiny TV in her cell, her heart breaking with every word. Even Eni, her best friend, was struggling to defend her. When Eni visited her at the station, she looked devastated. Amara, what happened? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. Did you really kill him? Amara shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to, Eni. I just wanted him to stop. I didn't know it was poison. Eni sighed, running a hand through her braids. This looks really bad, Amara. The Udos are going to make sure you take the fall for this. I know, Amara whispered. I don't know what to do. I'm going to find you a better lawyer, Eni promised. Someone who will actually fight for you. But you have to be honest with them. Tell them everything. Amara nodded, though she wasn't sure it would make a difference. No one cared about the truth. All they cared about was that Enkay was dead, and she was the one who had given him the herbs that killed him. As the days passed, Amara's hope slowly crumbled. The Udo family's influence was too strong, the evidence against her too damning. No one believed her story. Her mother called once, but it wasn't to offer support. You've disgraced us, her mother said coldly. How could you do this? How could you kill your husband? I didn't mean to, Amara sobbed. You don't understand what it was like living with him. You should have endured, her mother snapped, like I did with your father. But now you've ruined everything. Amara hung up, her heart shattering all over again. She was completely alone, and deep down, she knew there was only one way this would end. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. As Amara was led to the defendant's seat, her hands cuffed in front of her, she kept her eyes down, afraid to meet the gazes of the spectators who had come to witness the trial of the woman who had been dubbed the Black Widow. The media had painted her as a scheming, manipulative wife who had killed her wealthy husband to gain freedom and power. She felt like she was already guilty in their eyes. Her lawyer, a young but determined woman named Ada, sat beside her, flipping through her notes. "Amara," she whispered, leaning close, "just tell the truth. Don't let them twist your words." Amara nodded, though her throat felt dry and tight. She wasn't sure the truth would save her, but it was all she had left. The prosecution painted a damning picture. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor began, pacing in front of the court. "This case is simple. Amara Udo wanted out of her marriage, but instead of walking away, she chose a more sinister path. She poisoned her husband slowly and deliberately, using a mixture of herbs that she claimed was harmless. But the autopsy proves otherwise. She knew what she was doing. She knew it would kill him." Amara closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that she had only wanted peace, not death. But the evidence was against her. The prosecution presented the autopsy report, the jar of herbs found in her kitchen, and even testimony from a forensic toxicologist who explained how the compounds in the mixture had caused Ekong's heart to fail. When it was Ada's turn to speak, she tried to shift the narrative. "Yes, Amara gave her husband the herbs," Ada admitted, "but she didn't do it to kill him. She did it because she was desperate to escape the abuse, the control, the obsession that had made her life a living hell." She showed pictures of the bruises on Amara's arms, recorded conversations where Ekong had belittled and threatened her, and even testimony from Henny, who spoke about the fear Amara had lived with every day. But it wasn't enough. The jury's faces remained cold, unmoved. When the verdict came, Amara barely heard it. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Her knees buckled and she would have collapsed if Ada hadn't grabbed her arm. She was sentenced to life in prison. As she was led out of the courtroom, Amara glanced at the Udo family sitting in the front row. They looked satisfied, triumphant. In that moment, Amara realized that she had lost. Completely. Back in her prison cell, Amara sat on the hard bed, staring at the small window that let in a sliver of light. She was trapped again, in a different kind of cage, and this time, there was no escape. Amara sat quietly on the thin mattress in her prison cell, her back resting against the cold, concrete wall. The room was dim, with only a narrow window, letting in a weak stream of daylight. She had been here for 6 months now, but time had lost all meaning. The days blurred together, each one as gray and lifeless as the last. Her hands rested on her lap, the same hands that had once painted bright, colorful canvases and held dreams of a beautiful life. Now they were scarred and rough, marked by a life spent surviving rather than living. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she could still hear the echoes of the courtroom verdict. Guilty. One word had sealed her fate. One word had taken the last shred of hope from her. Her mind drifted back to that day, the day Ekong had died. She could still see his face twisted in pain as he collapsed at her feet. She hadn't meant to kill him. She had only wanted peace. But somehow, peace had come at the cost of his life and her freedom. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside her cell. Amara opened her eyes slowly, watching as a guard approached and slid a tray of food through the slot in the door. She didn't move. She hadn't eaten much in days. Hunger didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. "Hey," the guard said, leaning closer. "You have a visitor." Amara blinked, surprised. She hadn't had any visitors since her sentencing. Not her mother, who had disowned her. Not Annie, who had tried to defend her, but had grown distant after the trial. "Who is it?" Amara asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. The guard shrugged. "Some lawyer. Says she's working on your case." Amara's heart gave a faint, painful thud. A lawyer? What was the point? The case was closed, and she was already serving a life sentence. Still, a flicker of curiosity stirred within her. She followed the guard down the narrow corridor to the visitor's room. As she stepped inside, she saw a young woman with short curly hair and a kind smile sitting at the table. "Amara," the woman said, standing up and extending her hand. "My name is Ifeanyi. I'm with the Innocence Project. We're reviewing your case." Amara stared at her, confused. "Why?" "I was convicted. It's over." Ifeanyi shook her head. "It's not over. We found new evidence that might prove your innocence. We believe you were set up." Amara's breath caught in her throat. "Set up? By who?" "We don't know yet," Ifeanyi said. "But if you're willing to fight, we might be able to get you out of here." For the first time in months, Amara felt a spark of hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. She nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm ready to fight." And for the first time, Amara realized that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet.